Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, the day of the great American eclipse of 2024 has finally come, and while millions of people prepare to watch this incredible celestial event, many will be disappointed as an untimely outbreak of severe storms might end up eclipsing the solar eclipse. According to the most recent weather forecasts, the southern plains, as well as the Gulf Coast area and other parts of the South, are about to experience large hailstorms, as well as damaging wind gusts and possible tornadoes. Not only that, but there are many who are concerned about the possibility of history repeating itself. Now, just to be clear, it'll help you to know that the path of today's solar eclipse is going to cross over the path of the solar eclipse that occurred 7 years ago in 2017. And it's interesting to note that the cross point of these two paths is going to take place in Carbondale, Illinois, which is a region that's also been known as Little Egypt. Now you might be wondering, well, how often does this happen? How often does the path of a solar eclipse cross the path of a previous solar eclipse and within the time span of, say, 7 years? Well, according to the research of Ernest T. Wright, he mapped the paths of every total solar eclipse for the past 5,000 years, and what he found is that this cosmic phenomenon whereby a solar eclipse crosses the path of a previous solar eclipse, this happens on average of once every 366 years. So yeah, this isn't a very common occurrence. That being the case, it might interest you to know that it was 213 years ago. That's when a total solar eclipse crossed the path of a previous solar eclipse within the time span of 7 years. As a matter of fact, it was June 16th, 1806. That's when the path of a total solar eclipse crossed our country from California to Massachusetts. And then a little over 5 years later, on September 17th, 1811, the path of an annular solar eclipse crossed over the previous path, and the cross point was right where the Ohio River and the Mississippi River meet in southern Missouri and Illinois. It was around 3 months later when a series of massive earthquakes caused a great deal of destruction in the central Mississippi Valley. According to one report, there were over 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest from December 1811 through March 1812. And there were between 6,000 and 10,000 earthquakes in the area of Missouri where New Madrid is located near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. And as we consider the massive earthquakes that occurred right there at the cross point of these two eclipses, well, it's no wonder that many are concerned about history repeating itself as the eclipse occurring today is crossing the path of the 2017 eclipse in the same area, which is now known as the New Madrid fault line. Is history about to repeat itself as today's eclipse sets off a series of major earthquakes in the months to come? I can't say for sure, but it's possible. What about the earthquakes that just occurred last week on the west and east coasts of the United States? You know, we've come to expect earthquakes on the west coast, but earthquakes on the east coast are much more rare. That being the case, New Yorkers were shocked this past week as the largest earthquake in New York City since 1884 rocked the largest metropolitan area of North America. It's also interesting to note that this quake registered 4.8 on the Richter scale, and this just days before the April 8th, or 4/8, Great American Eclipse passes over upper state New York. I'm sure it's all just a huge coincidence. New Jersey also experienced this quake and then afterwards experienced a 2.0 magnitude aftershock from the 4.8 earthquake that shook the Northeast this past Friday morning. Residents have been warned about the possibility of ongoing tremors, which could last for the next week. And as we continue to watch today's events unfold, let's pray that we don't suffer a repeat of the earthquakes that followed the eclipse of 1811. Meanwhile, NASA is preparing to launch 3 rockets today from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. The first rocket will launch about 35 minutes before local peak eclipse time, one during the peak eclipse time, and then 35 minutes after the peak eclipse time. And according to the Apep team in charge of this research, each rocket will deploy 4 small scientific instruments, which will measure changes in electric and magnetic fields, density, as well as temperature. Now, I have no problem with scientists learning more about God's creation. I even encourage it. And yet at the same time, we must not fail to recognize that this team of researchers refers to themselves as Apep. And according to them, The name of their team is also the name of a serpent deity from ancient Egyptian mythology. Here's how they explain it on the official NASA website, and I quote it here. Barj Yataya, I think this is the guy's name that started this. He designed the Apep mission, choosing the acronym because it is also the name of the serpent deity from ancient Egyptian mythology, nemesis of the sun deity Ra. And it was said that Apep pursued Ra and every so often nearly consumed him, resulting in an eclipse. That's right. This team of NASA scientists who are launching 3 rockets today have named their team after a serpent deity from ancient Egyptian mythology that tried to destroy the Egyptian sun deity Ra. And so at the very least, this is just an unusual choice of names for those launching rockets at a solar eclipse. And if that's not strange enough, the researchers at CERN, they're using their Large Hadron Collider today during the eclipse in order to, search for the supersymmetry particles, which could facilitate the unification of fundamental forces. Or more simply put, they're going to use their 16-mile circular tube to accelerate particles in the hopes of finding the basic building blocks of matter. Some are actually concerned that this research could create a black hole there in Geneva, Switzerland, which could end up destroying the earth. Others are worried that this is going to open a portal to the pit of hell where certain demons have been kept in chains since the time of Noah's flood. And just to be clear, it's in Revelation chapter 9 where the Apostle John describes the day when the 5th angel sounds its trumpet and a star falls from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. Now, it's important to understand that these aren't normal locusts. No, instead, these are demonic entities who actually have a king named Apollyon. As a matter of fact, it's in the same chapter, just a few verses later. There, John tells us that they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek, he has the name Apollyon. Now, just to be clear, the name Abaddon or Apollyon in the Greek, it just means destruction. And so the king of destruction will eventually be released from the bottomless pit. And the Lord is going to allow this destroyer to lead this demon horde to wreak havoc here on the earth. And with that being the case, you might be interested to know that the Circular Hadron Collider, better known as CERN, it actually straddles the French-Swiss border and is partly situated in a little town in Switzerland where the Temple of Apollo, which is also called Apollicum, once stood. And there, there are those who are convinced that those in charge of CERN chose this specific location because they believe that Apollicum is a gateway which will lead to the bottomless pit. Now, I don't know if the people in charge of CERN actually believe this. I don't know if they're really trying to open the bottomless pit. And I can assure you that this gateway is not going to be open today there in Switzerland. The reason for my confidence is based on the fact that the bottomless pit won't be opened until after the Antichrist rises to power, just after the rapture of the church. And with that being the case, we can be certain that the CERN tests that are being run today will not be opening up a portal to that abyss, at least not today. But at the same time, it's also interesting to note that they do have a huge statue of a Hindu deity named Shiva there on their grounds. And just to be clear, Shiva is the non-binary deity of destruction who, according to Hindu mythology, performs a dance of destruction which shatters the sun and the moon and destroys the whole earth. And so we have to ask, why in the world do the scientists at CERN have a huge statue of Shiva the Destroyer right there on their campus? And why are NASA researchers naming their eclipse group after an Egyptian snake god who tries to destroy the sun? Well, in order to answer these questions, I want to consider a statement that Paul presents in Romans chapter 1. It's there where he assures us that the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in their unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore, God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped and served the creation rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. According to Paul, those who fail to submit their lives to the one who created the heavens and the earth, well, they always end up worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. And so as you prepare to witness the incredible solar eclipse that's taking place today, I encourage you to remember that we're not called to worship the sun in the sky. We're called to worship and serve the Son of God, the one who created the sun in the sky. And listen, instead of looking to the creation for a sign, rather than looking to the creation for a word from the universe, let's look to the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who can lead us into his truth. And so regardless of what happens here today, and regardless of what happens after this eclipse is done, and regardless of whether there's earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars and these sorts of things, I encourage you to remember that we have been called to serve the Son of God and accomplish his great commission. And that's what we should do as we continue to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.